Memorial Hall tonight for our recorded meeting. To welcome everybody to the Ordinary Council meeting of the Alpine Shire Council, 26th of May 2026, as I've already said, at the Memorial Hall. And we will start with item 1, which is recording and live streaming of council meetings. CEO to read a statement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All council meetings are filmed with both video and audio being recorded. Video is focused on a specific area, however audio from the entire room is captured. In common with all narrative during council meetings, verbal responses to congratulations, obituaries and question time will not be recorded in the written minutes. By submitting a question, you consent to your question being read aloud at the meeting. The reasoning behind recording council meetings is to hold us more accountable and to improve transparency of council's decision-making to our community. The full meeting is being streamed live on council's YouTube channel, which is Alpine Shire Council, and will also be available on the YouTube channel shortly after this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. We move on to item 2, which is acknowledgement of traditional custodians and recognition of all people, and I ask all those who can to stand. Alpine Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting today. Council also acknowledges all of the traditional owners of the wider lands of the area known as the Alpine Shire. In addition, we acknowledge those people who have contributed to the rich fabric of our community and who continue to strive to make wise decisions that will improve the quality of life for all. Thank you. Item 3 is confirmation of minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting M4 held on the 28th of April 2026. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting M4 held on the 28th of April 2026 as circulated be confirmed. Councillors. Moved Councillor Byrne, seconded Councillor Anderson. Councillor Byrne.
Nothing.
Councillor Anderson.
Nothing. No.
Any councillors have anything to add or comment? Nope. Take this one to vote then. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. We move on next to apologies, and tonight we have 2 unexpected apologies. First of all is Councillor Smith, who has been called away during today, unexpectedly. And our second apology is Ms Buckley, who is our Director of Assets. She has also been unexpectedly needed with her family at this time. And we have Mr McDonough, who is our Manager of Growth and Future, with us in Ms Buckley's place. Thank you. The next item is obituaries and congratulations, and I'm going to start on my left with Councillor Tansen.
So I've just got one. It wasn't from this month. It was an apology last month as I was on the back of the tow truck. But this one goes out to one of the ex-local boys, Billy Cootie from Mountain Beauty, who had his debut game as part of the Sydney Swans. And played brilliantly, kicked a beautiful goal, and yeah, well done.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco.
For this month, 2 congratulations. The first one is I would like to congratulate the Alpine Shire Emergency Manager Coordinator, Karen Van Heusen, who received last Tuesday the Australian Institute of Emergency Services National Excellence Award for Innovation. Her work and achievement in emergency management through the first 72 hours program have been able to lead not only our community but also all communities in Australia to be more prepared and more resilient in time of disaster. And the second, I would like also to acknowledge everyone involved with the Fiera Italian Festival in Myrtleford, the committee, the volunteer, the Myrtleford community, and all who visitors who enjoy an amazing festival. For me, it was a rare comeback to my family roots. So thank you to everyone, and see you in 2027. Grazie mille a tutti, e ci vediamo nel 2027 anno. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. Councillor Graham.
This week we learned of the passing of David Coates. David's been the controller of the SES in Myrtle since 2022. David's going to be sorely missed by the community, his family, and also his SES family. Rather a tragic loss to the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Byrne.
Nothing to add.
Councillor Anderson.
Nothing to add.
Righto, I'll just chairs because I've got this. I'm going to start with an obituary for Graham Cox, who's a local engineer around in Bright for a long time. He also spent 40 plus years with the CFA in Bright and in many leadership roles. I don't know enough about the CFA to be able to remember what they are, but he was very dedicated to his community through the CFA. And one of the things that I really liked about hearing about his life at his farewell was that he'd been very involved with the Scouts as well, and his brother talked about did, and I don't know what I mean. It actually means do your best. And I just think that was really, I've taken that with me, and I think he was put forward as somebody who did that all his life. I wanted to comment on a more positive note on Connor McEwen, who's a local boy who was involved in the Myrtleford garage sales, the whole town garage sale, as one of the organisers, and he chose to do that because that then meant that he could determine where the fundraising went, and he chose the police legacy as a reflection of some of the horrible stuff that's happened here in the Alpine Shire, and a reflection of how fantastic our community is and how much they respect the police. He raised over $4,100 for that process, and I actually got a phone call from one of the adults who was part of the garage sales just recently saying how much he appreciated our help and how terrific it was that we could be part of what they're trying to achieve. And she talked about trying to encourage more young people over the years, or each year, to choose their who they'd like to contribute fundraising to and to participate in the same way Connor did. So a really good start. While I'm on with young people, the Resilient Alpine Youth Squad held their second Come and Try Day this weekend we've had, and it was a great success. Different people there, different organisations showing their stuff, but it really well attended, so well done to all those guys. I know much organisation goes into that, not just for the youngsters pulling it together, but for all the people who turn up with their gear. Another absolute plus is Brad Drennan, who's one of he's our OHS rep. I actually don't know what his other role is. But he's absolutely turned around OHS in the Alpine Shire since he took the role that he's in now, and he was shortlisted as a rising star for OHS award just last week. And even though he didn't actually win the award, he managed to talk for 15 minutes unprepared about what he's been doing in the Alpine Shire and how constructive that's been, and network really well to help build his resources and his capacity even more. I was going to talk about Karen Van Hoosen, but thank you, Councillor Ronco. Congratulations to Karen. The last thing I wanted to say is congratulations to the Papunga CFA for their official opening of their shed. It was a fantastic day on Saturday. Great achievement to get the shed built and get it formally opened. It has been open for a while in the community, you've already had a part there. But what I really loved about the day is how far back they went in history and how well they could show, again, that really deep community connection and commitment from local people. And I really appreciated hearing about that. So thank you to all of those people. And that's enough. Yes.
How short was the shortlist?
6. So Brad Drennan was shortlisted out of one of 6. Thanks. We now move on to item 6, which is declarations by councillors of conflict of interest. And I'll just ask councillors to say the one I do. I have a conflict of interest at item 8.2.7 and I'll be stepping out of that item. We move on then to public questions, and we will start with questions on notice. And the first one comes from Jenny Rogers, who is on behalf of Neville Jacob, who we understand is ill tonight and couldn't get here. He had planned to. questions at the meeting are about a project that is trying to get going in Myrtleford. And the first one is, we're still awaiting a response and clarification of any further requirements, if any, for our Myrtleford build. How long will it take for an answer in relation to this to progress the project? And document 2 is, when does council foresee that our permit will be granted? I'll ask Ms. Cook to address that one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Jacobs, for your question. The planning permit for this development was issued in May 2023. However, before construction can commence, the proponent needs to provide amended plans to satisfy permit conditions. There are a couple of outstanding issues with the amended plans. One is outstanding conditions from the Department of Transport and Planning, being DTP. We are not the responsible authority for the intersection of the development and the Great Alpine Road. That is the Department of Transport and Planning. So the Department of Transport and Planning has provided advice back to proponent via planning on concerns they have with the plans that have been submitted, and provided some suggestions or annotations to assist with having those amended plans finalised. There are also some outstanding engineering conditions with regard to that planning permit, and the council engineers have been in touch with the applicant to inform them of what is still outstanding with these documents. So once we have the required technical information, those condition plans could be finalised and the construction can begin.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Thank you, Ms. Cook. Question 2 is from Wayne Smith, a local person who is in the room with us. Would you like to read your questions, or would I read you?
So my concern is the amount of burning off that's been going in before.
Yes. So you need to stand up at the microphone, or I'm happy just to read the questions that you've forwarded. And could you please state your name and where you're from?
Yep. I'm Wayne Smith from Myrtleford. Can you hear me?
It's on. There's the
Green light's on.
Okay.
It's on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's better, thanks.
Yeah, Wayne Smith, lived in Myrtleford for the last 4 years. I moved up from Crime Ridge in Melbourne. So my concern is the amount of burning off that's going on in Myrtleford. People seem to be just flouting the rules. A lot of the time, if I look out, I'm up on the hill there. At 4 o'clock, there'll be fires going. So there doesn't seem to be any regards, the bylaws. I don't think people understand them. Maybe more marketing or advertising needs to be done in the local paper or the local magazine or the internet, alerting people to the fact that it is just, in the valley, not quite as bright, obviously. So, in essence, what's happening about environmental laws and tightening them up.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Community local law is council's local law which regulates a range of amenity, public health and environmental and safety matters. For anyone who's interested, the community local law is published on our website, and it's written in quite plain English for people. At clause 3.2 of that local law, it outlines the conditions around the lighting of fires in residential areas. So there are various conditions that govern the lighting of fires in residential areas. It includes a number of items regarding when they can be lit, what times of day, what can be lit on the fire, and what supervision is required. However, for more detailed information are contained in community local law. If you believe, if you're concerned that any local law has been broken, including that one, the appropriate mechanism to get that looked at is to actually make a report through to council. We have a local laws team, and part of their role is to investigate reports such as that. So that is the appropriate mechanism. A local law is a legal law. It has a legal enforcement process that goes with it. So if you believe that any local law, and it governs a number of things, not just lighting fires, a number of things. So if you believe that any local law is being broken
council. With respect, I think a lot of people, older people maybe in the community, don't look at websites and they're not going to be looking up, when they can and can't light fires. So, and I think there's not enough actual policing of, the whole area. You could drive by at 4 o'clock on any given day in Myrtleford and there'll be fires going. And they're not fires, people, lighting fires to get warm. They're burning leaves, they're burning whatever. So I think a lot more needs to be done, especially given the climate change issues the world's facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, we'll take that on board. And just so you know, we did, after you had a conversation with me, we did do some concept, not specifically that. It actually was about the local law and green waste availability. So we've started to move.
Okay, thanks.
There's no more questions that have been provided on promotions, so I do ask questions from the floor. And Mr. Dyer, would you please get up the microphone, state where you're from and your name?
Ray Dyer. Are they working? No. No, green lights on. How's that? That's better. My name's Ray Dyer and reside at Nucknuck, Camping Ground. Last month, I spoke about Centenary Park toilets where the tap's really powerful, and I wondered why there was water right around the hand basins one day, and that was the reason. I'm wondering whether that's been repaired or not, because the one in Myrtleford, I also spoke at Jubilee Park toilets too. That one's still the same. And with all the laugh here last weekend, the amount of men that would have been splashed from that tap and wasted water, because you can't even put your hand underneath it, it's that powerful. The one as you walk in on the left-hand side. I see there's a few coat hooks in the back of the cubicles now. I don't know whether that was done over the last month, but I went out to Apex and there's none there, and probably not any at Rotary Park too. It's handy to have a hook behind the door for every toilet, especially for winter. When people have got coats and everything else, and I'm wondering when will those taps be repaired, if they haven't already been repaired in Centenary Park.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Dyer. I can confirm that your request was transferred into our customer request system. It was assigned to a member of the team to investigate. I'm not able to confirm, however, this evening what the status is of that investigation, but I am confident that that's been logged in our system for one of the team to have a look into.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Now, the second question is, with a motorbike accident in the Alpine Shire just recently, and a fatal accident, I don't know whether the street sweeper is cleaning the intersection, getting all the loose stone off the intersections. If he's just doing the leaves, I think it'd be a very good idea if he went around the three towns or even around the Shire with the loose stone on the shoulders and in the intersections, because it's not a really good thing for motorbikes, but I hate for another fatality.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. I'm not aware of the specific incident that you referred to. However, I'm happy to pass on that broad request that we look at appropriate cleaning of the road intersections. I'll pass that on to our team.
Well, that's good, because the roads are the worst I've ever seen in my life.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Are there any further questions from the floor? Thank you. We will move on to item 8, which is presentation of reports by officers. Starting off with reports from our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Jeremy 8.1.1.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report relates to contracts which have been approved under delegation by the CEO. So just to remind the public, the CEO's delegation is $200,000, and where contracts for capital projects are signed by the CEO under delegation below that amount, we bring them for transparency to council. So I'm reporting two this evening. Both of them relate to works in the Toowoomba Pioneer Memorial Park, and both of them are actually awards to the same contractor. They've been separated because they're actually tendered separately, but the same contractor was successful in both cases. The first one is the Toowoomba Pioneer Memorial Park court resurfacing. The successful tender in this case was Tough Group Holdings, so they're from Heatherton in Victoria. We actually budgeted $60,000 for this contract, and the contract was awarded at $83,633.90, so that's the first contract. Second contract was also Toowoomba Pioneer Memorial Park, and this was for fence renewal. The successful tender was also Tough Group Holdings. The budgeted amount was $50,000, and the contract was awarded at $34,032.27. So those are the two capital project contracts which were approved under delegation. I've also noted here that a memorandum of understanding has been executed under CEO delegation between the Alpine Shire Council and Tourism North East, so T&E. And this MOU commits council as one of 8 regional tourism partners to a 3-year partnership over the period from the 1st of July 2026 to the 30th of June 2029. Financial commitment associated with the execution of this MOU is $42,000 of base operational funding in year 1, and that's then subject to CPI increases in year 2 and year 3 of the MOU. Year 1 cost has been included in the draft 2026-27 budget, which is currently out on public exhibition through till Wednesday this week. There are additional costs associated with the buy-in to activity funding, and these are subject to Council's normal annual budgeting processes. We will post a copy of the MOU to Council's website so that that's made available to the public for them to view. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. Councillors. Moved, Councillor Townsend. Seconded, Councillor Ronco. Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, just on T&E, what sort of things do T&E provide for us as the Alpine Shire?
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. So the key activities, if I list them here, industry and product development, Ride High Country and group marketing, so a member of the utilising the Ride High Country campaign to promote cycling in the Alpine Shire. Regional projects such as content development and on-site social media support, visitor servicing, digital such as managing regional digital platforms including enhancements on the regional website and public relations and media funnels. I'll give you one example where through T&E's advocating on behalf of Council we've successfully secured and delivered funding. That was the upgrades to the Murray Mountains Rail Trail. So T&E successfully advocated for significant funding on behalf of the 3 councils that the rail trail passes through, so being Indigo Shire, Alpine Shire and the Royal City of Wangaratta. And with that funding that T&E secured for us, we were able to deliver the upgrades in Popunka, so the Colour Bridge, plus all the curb and channel along Service Street and an upgrade to the shared trail between Brad and Popunka. And we also delivered an upgrade into the Robin service station. So that was directly as a result of the advocacy that Tourism North East carried out on behalf of the Alpine Shire Council, as an example of one of the activities they get involved in.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Ronco.
Just on the first item, so it is great to see some important capital projects moving forward. Just to know, when will these works start and be completed?
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. So the first item there, the court resurfacing, we've got an estimated completion date of the 4th of November 2026. And the reason that date is sometime in the future is because the acrylic resurfacing products which are used cannot be applied during the colder months of winter. This is the earliest date that we were able to book in with that contractor essentially once the weather warms up. So that's early November we're expecting to finish that. The Pioneer Park court fencing, we haven't got a confirmed deadline for that at this stage. We're still in the process of engaging with our stakeholders to ensure that what's being delivered aligns with the needs and the expectations of the community. So that's a work in progress on the court fencing.
Do you have more questions?
Thank you. And for the second item, so I think Councillor Tenzent highlights the buy-in activity funding, but I wanted just to present that Tourism Northeast is one of the 12 visitor economic partnerships established at the directive of the Victoria State Government. It is also the peak tourism organization for Northeast Victoria, the region known as Victoria Isle Country. Tourism Northeast plays an important role in the Alpine tourism strategy, and it's supporting our Alpine community. So this memorandum of understanding will help us to continue and reinforce Alpine partnership with Victoria Tourism Organization like TNE. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rocco. Any other councillors have a Councillor Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Turing, I noticed the cost for the golf resurfacing is significantly higher than what you budgeted for. Could that be attributed to the poor condition of the surface at the moment, or is there some other attributing factor?
Thank you, Councillor Graham. I don't believe it relates to the court surface condition, because we would have been aware of the condition when we went out to tender. However, what I've observed is the council officers make an assessment of what the estimated cost of these projects are. They use a range of factors to determine what that estimate is, based on scoping, based on previous projects, but then really it is subject to the market. So they go out to the market with a public tender, and the ultimate price that we need to pay is determined based on market conditions. So it's who are the contractors in play at that point in time, and what is the pricing of their contract or their tender to council. Pricing, of course, is only one factor that we take into consideration. There are a range of factors that ultimately result in council officers making a recommendation. So in this case, perhaps, there's a tight market, the cost could be higher than were originally anticipated. There could have been perhaps a lot of demand for services from the port resurfacing companies over that period, but ultimately it was subject to a public tender, so that we can be confident that we get value for money for council.
Thank you.
No further questions? Comments? Take it from the vote then. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we move on to Mr. McDonald in his role, tonight's role, and item 8.2.1.
Thank you, Mayor Nicholas. So, councillors, item 8.2.1 is the draft Sporting Reserves Maintenance Support Policy 2026 on page 7 of your agenda. The draft policy aims to provide an equitable allocation of resources to the many sporting reserves managed by committees of management appointed either by the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, or indeed community asset committees appointed by council. The draft policy was informed by targeted stakeholder engagement, and that has shaped the draft policy attached to your agenda, and it's now ready for wider public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Councillors? Anybody move seconded? Moved Councillor Anderson, seconded Councillor Graham. Councillor Anderson.
Since we've consulted with stakeholders to do the draft, who would benefit now for looking at this draft?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. So those various entities that are mentioned in the policy have provided targeted stakeholder engagement. But really, for us as council officers in particular, we're very interested in the wider community reviewing the policy and seeing, have we got it right? Are there any issues that we haven't addressed in the policy? This policy will be with council for quite a long time. It is essentially going to update a policy from 2005. So it may be around for 2 decades, and we look forward to receiving any commentary from users of these spaces, those who aspire to see changes in these spaces, or perhaps highlighting to council other activities and uses that we should be supporting into the longer term.
Thank you. More? Yeah. Thank you.
I certainly
It said here that they identified some inequities in the previous sort of policy. How were they identified? What were the problems?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Essentially, what has happened is we had a limited amount of, dare I say, in layperson's terms, science behind some of the activities that were being undertaken in some of these reserves. And over time, through various different budgetary processes, some of the reserves are of different sizes and naturally will be allocated greater amounts of maintenance spend, perhaps based on them having grant applications that have upgraded some of their activities and the uses and infrastructure on the site. So over time, if you were to compare like for like across two different reserves, one group may be getting slightly more and one group may be getting slightly less for the same activity on maintenance. So what this policy seeks to do is provide clarity across the board and make sure that there's equity in any contribution from council. So if a committee is undertaking the same task in a reserve, it will be funded the same as a committee doing it in the upper ovens, the lower ovens, or the Kiwa, or anywhere else in the Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Given that there's a fair chance that we've probably missed some smaller clubs or organisations, is there any chance that they can hop on board at a later time?
Absolutely, Councillor Graham. At any point, if we feel that there are some sporting reserves that are missing or some new entities or existing entities that are maintaining sporting reserves, or those entities change, then we will, of course, review the policy at that time. But I'd encourage anyone who has perhaps feels that they're in that category today to contact Council as part of the upcoming, if Council chooses to endorse the draft, as part of the upcoming draft consultation next month.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors? Councillor Ronco.
It's not really a question, it's just a statement. So I think that it's a good practice to promote transparency and accountability in the allocation and use of council funding. So that's quite good. Thank you.
Anything further from councillors? Councillor Anderson.
Just on the end of that, how can people get in contact with council to be involved in this next process?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Anderson. So if Council endorses the draft policy, it will be uploaded to Council's Engage Alpine webpage. People who wish to make a submission will need to register on that webpage and participate through that process. It's quite seamless. Alternatively, people can contact Council at info@alpineshire.vic.gov.au and indicate that they wish to make a submission on the draft policy, and then that will make its way to my department as well.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald and councillors. Any further questions or comments? The recommendations on the screen and your papers. Or move to second, all those in favour? There we go. Thank you. And we move on to item 8.2.2.
Thank you, Mayor Nicholas. So, Councillors, item 8.2.2 is the lease of land at 5 Elm Court in Bright, and it's on page 10 of your agenda. This report relates to a new lease for land at Crown Allotment 2E, Section C2, Township of Bright, also known as 5 Elm Court. The land and the building is currently used as a dance hall, and if Council resolves to approve and execute the lease at tonight's ordinary Council meeting, this use is expected to continue.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. The recommendation, the councillors, is in your agenda and on the screen. Moved by Councillor Anderson. Seconded by Councillor Townsend. Councillor Anderson. Councillor Townsend.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Graham.
Thank you. This plot of land was also identified in the CENA, for future potential use. How does this lease tie into that?
Thank you, Councillor Graham. So yes, you're correct. The site has been identified in the draft Alpine Shire Community Infrastructure Needs Assessment 2025. And the CINA, or the draft CINA, was prepared on the principles of consolidation of council assets and land. It identifies 5 Elm Court as well as a number of other parcels of land in Bright as having potential for consolidation or repurposing, with the existing dance activities able to be relocated to a private studio or accommodated within a future multi-purpose community hub in Bright. The draft CINA recommends that a multi-purpose community hub be constructed in each one of the major townships, Bright, Mount Beauty and Myrtleford. While the development of a new multi-purpose community hub is considered a long-term outcome, well in advance of 10 years' time, within the draft CINA, a 5-year lease is considered appropriate in the interim. The site has also been identified in the Alpine Shire Aquatics and Indoor Stadium Feasibility Study 2026, which was adopted by Council at the Ordinary Council meeting held in March 2026, earlier this year. It was identified as a potential location, option B, for a new aquatic centre for Bright, if option A, a redeveloped Bright Sports Centre, is not deemed desirable, feasible or viable. This is also a long-term consideration in 10 plus years. Given those two major strategic documents have opinions or findings and recommendations on the future role and function of this site, the final preferred use for the site will be determined as part of the preparation of a structure plan for Bright later this decade. A structure plan will also be prepared for Proponka, Myrtleford and Mount Beauty to the south.
Councillor Graham, any further questions?
Nothing further than that.
Any further questions from anybody else? No? Recommendation that we approve and execute lease the land at Crown Allotment 2E, C2, Township Bright, and sign the sealed set lease at the appropriate stage of the meeting. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And we move on to 8.2.3.
Thank you, Mayor Nicholas. So, Councillors, item 8.2.3 is the lease of various parcels of land to tennis clubs in Bright, Mount Beauty and Myrtleford, which is on page 14 of your agenda. This report relates to 3 new leases for land comprising a part of, and the details are on your screen, land known as the Bright Tennis Club in Bright, land known as the Myrtleford Lawn Tennis Club in Myrtleford, and land known as the Mount Beauty Tennis Club in Mount Beauty. The proposed leases formalise the ongoing use of these important community sites for tennis courts by each of the tennis clubs into the future.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. There's a recommendation in our papers. Councillors, moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel confident the execution of these leases for a 20-year period will give all 3 of the tennis clubs stability, and it will guarantee the community's continued access to these clubs. And the Myrtleford Lawn Tennis Club that has the Easter tennis, I'm sure they will be more than happy to be able to continue.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Anderson. Anybody else got anything to add? No? Okay, we will take this one to vote. All those in favour of the recommendation as it stands? I think it's unanimous. Thank you. And we move on to 8.2.4.
Thank you, Mayor Nicholas. So, Councillors, item 8.2.4, lease of land at site 5 of the Mount Beauty Airfield on lot 2 PS 705744, Embankment Drive, Mount Beauty, is on page 20 of your agenda. This report relates to a new lease for site 5 at the Mount Beauty Airport on the lot mentioned. It seeks to correct a previous error where a similar lease a decade or so ago was considered by Council, but it now appears clear that the lease was never filed appropriately. So Council's reconsideration of this lease essentially is required.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Councillors, this recommendation in your agenda and on the screen. Thank you, Councillor Byrne, and a second Councillor Anderson. Councillor Byrne.
I note that in April 26, Mount Beauty Airport Management Association approved the transfer of the lease as part of the proposed sale. Is the proposed sale still to go ahead?
Apologies, Councillor Byrne, could you repeat that question?
In April 2026, Council and Mount Beauty Airport Management Association approved the transfer of the lease as part of the proposed sale. However, we were unable to locate the lease, signed lease documentation. We're now executing a new lease agreement, and as is required to be entered into prior to any transfer associated with the sale. Is the sale still prepared to go, proposed to go?
Yes, Councillor Byrne, I can confirm that's correct.
Any Councillor Anderson? Anything else? Councillor Ronco?
What has the Alpine considered to improve these agreement processes and to track them better in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. Yes, council officers have implemented or were aware of the possibility of these issues a number of years ago, even though it only came to light this year. Council officers have implemented a new process in the early 2020s to guide the storage of council agreements, electronic of course, and this issue is unlikely to occur again.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from councillors? No. Recommendation, as you know, is in your papers, etc. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we move on to 8.2.5.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Councillors, item 8.2.5, the lease of land in Bright, Mount Beauty and Myrtleford to Alpine Children's Services is on page 24 of your agenda. This report relates to 3 leases for premises and associated land at land known on your screen. The details are on your screen, known as Lakeview Children's Centre in Mount Beauty, Mountain View Children's Centre in Myrtleford, and Alpine View Children's Centre in Bright. The proposed leases formalise the ongoing use of these sites for the provision of childcare services, while documenting the terms and conditions under which these properties have historically been occupied for this use, clarity regarding responsibilities, how assets are managed, and any legal compliance for both council and the leasee will be ensured and known.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Councillors? Councillor moved, Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Ronco. Councillor Anderson.
Just a couple of questions. Is Peppercorn rental agreements for childcare facilities a common agreement between providers and councils? And also, is the provision of the Alpine Children's Service allowing mental health and immunisation programs within the lease agreement?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Peppercorn is not unusual, if I can answer your question like that. Local governments across Victoria have a variety of models in relation to childcare. Some councils provide childcare services directly themselves in conjunction with the private sector. Some, like Alpine Shire Council, have provided buildings at a Peppercorn rent to facilitate this important community and economic development service, and others are not involved at all. And yes, the proposed leases for each of the 3 sites would require the leasee to provide a dedicated space in each facility for maternal, child and health services, another important community service.
Thank you. Any more? Councillor Anderson? Councillor Ronco?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions from councillors? No? Take this recommendation to vote. Again, it's in your papers. Those in favour? Just back to quickly. It's unanimous. And we move on to 8.2.6.
Thank you, Mayor Nicholas. Councillors, item 8.2.6, adoption of Amendment C65 LP to the Alpine Planning Scheme, is on page 29 of your agenda. This report summarises the outcomes of the public exhibition and the independent planning panel process associated with Amendment C65LP. Council officers weren't able to resolve two of the submissions received during the exhibition period, requiring it to be referred to an independent planning panel for consideration as required by the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The panel supports the amendment with the post-exhibition changes proposed by council officers at the panel hearing earlier this year. Of note, council, is the panel's comments that bushfire risk is a significant matter for strategic planning, amongst other things, in Alpine Shire, and it notes that this will form a major consideration in the development of the Alpine Shire Rural Direction Strategy, which you'll be aware is currently in draft form. Council officers are very much aware of this, and we will be continuing to address bushfire risk as we move forward on our ambitious strategic work programme. The Council report recommends that Council adopts Amendment C65LP with the post-exhibition changes proposed by Council officers and supported by the Independent Planning Panel prior to submitting it to the Minister for Planning for approval and gazettal and for it to take effect in the planning scheme.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Councillors have the recommendation. Councillor Ronco. Councillor Anderson. Councillor Ronco.
Not a big question, but just, I recognize that the Alpine Planning Scheme is a very important document to guide the council strategy. And this amendment, C65 Alpine, has taken a bit of time to be presented for its adoption, but I'm very satisfied with the important engagement process and the independent planning panel hearing to address the submission received during the exhibition process. So, on that. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson. Anybody else like to comment or add? I'm just going to follow up from Councillor Ronco. Enormous piece of work behind this, a really thorough review, which has picked up quite a number of anomalies, straightening them out, and it's the first time I've ever seen a panel report, and it's very thorough, and they've done a really good job of assessing what's best for us right now, and I really appreciate the effort and time that's gone into it to get it to there, and I look forward to what the vote is tonight, so we can go further forward. So, having said that, let's take it to vote. All those in favour? Look at that, unanimous. Thanks. And we move on to the one that I'm going to step out of, which is the dinner plane bus service. I have a material conflict through a close family member who will be using the bus regularly this winter.
We'll note that Mayor Nicholas leaves the meeting at 17:48 to go on the front very screen. 8.2.7 dinner plane bus service. Mr. Don.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillors, item 8.2.7, the dinner plane bus service 2026, is on page 35 of your agenda. This report recommends that Council enter into a memorandum of understanding with Alpine Resorts Victoria for the delivery of the dinner plane bus service for the 2026 winter season. The report recommends that Council provide a financial commitment of $175,000 GST exclusive to Alpine Resorts Victoria to support the operating costs of providing a dinner plane bus service. It also recommends that Council delegate authority to the Chief Executive Officer to sign the Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Yeah, Councillor Anderson. And seconded, Councillor Ronco. Councillor Anderson.
I can see in the report that the bus receives pretty good patronage and is a benefit to younger people and workers in the area. Is the running cost projected to increase into the future for the service?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Although the pricing, I'm advised that the pricing for the service is yet to be determined, we have not been alerted to any greater costs than perhaps CPI or the normal inflation over the past year.
Councillor Ronco.
Nothing to add there.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Byrne.
In 2023, we committed $140,000 for the provision of this service. It's now risen to $175,000. Has the input of ARV, Alpine Resorts Victoria, increased commensurately over this time? And do the staff members operating up at Alpine Resorts Victoria pay a subsidy or pay a fee to use the bus?
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. So in relation to the costs or the contribution from council, it has increased over that 3-year period, and there are a number of different figures used. The figure has not changed from last year to what's proposed under this year. I think what it shows is that both organisations have been finding an appropriate level of subsidy, essentially, from both organisations to provide the service. Essentially, moving forward, I'm advised as well that staff are using it potentially for free. So we have put provisions into the MOU that require ARV to articulate precisely or give us a lot more of their financial data at the end of the winter season, so we can do it yet again another thorough review of any contribution to ARV for this service and have a frank conversation about that issue.
Thank you.
Any other councillors? That's me. Thank you. I've got, I think, 3 different questions, all interrelated, and some you might have to take on notice, because you may not have the answer for. How much does the ARC contribute on top of our $175,000? The second question is, how much do users pay per ticket? And also, in last year, 6,579 tickets were sold. At $125,000, that equates to $26.60 per ticket, plus whatever the ARC contributes. Oh, sorry, and given that this $175,000 comes from the dinner plane reserve, how will this be reflected in our budget when the reserve is expended in 2 or 3 years' time?
Thank you, Councillor Graham. I'll try my best to go through those 4 questions. So first and foremost is, what is the contribution from Alpine Resorts Victoria? Essentially, Council's contribution is, and looking at last year's figures and basing that as a proportion on next year, Council's contribution was $175,000. There were contributions from other entities, obviously ticket sales, both online and in person. And essentially the service ran at a loss of $130,000, which is essentially ARV's contribution to that service. So that answers the first question. In relation to your second question, just having a look at some of the online material, it appears that tickets for adults, so travel from Mount Hotham to Dinner Plain is free. Adults is $22 from Dinner Plain to Mount Hotham. A child is $11.50, under 5 is free. A season pass is $199, and a child season pass 17 years and under is $99. Your third question, Councillor Graham.
What will happen when the Dinner Plain reserve has been expended?
So as the agenda report indicates, the cost, the $175,000 contribution, if Council resolves to allocate it, would come from the Dinner Plain Reserve. I advise that potentially there's 1 or 2 more years where there would be funding in the Dinner Plain Reserve, and that will be reflected in the budget. But again, as part of our review next year and our recommendations to the Executive and Councillors, we will have to determine where that funding comes from. And I believe there's 1 question still outstanding.
No? No, that actually covered them all. Councillor Tansey.
Yeah, so on the topic of the ticket sales and costs, do we know if the tickets were one way, both ways, or for a whole day?
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. If you don't mind, I'll take that on notice and I'll provide information for the next council meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. go to the vote then. All those in favour of the motion? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Should we invite Claire back? All is forgiven at 17:55. You may have the meeting back.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. And we move on to item 8.2.8. Last one.
Thank you, Mayor Nicholas. So, councillors, item 8.2.8, process for implementing updated flood controls in the Alpine Planning Scheme, is on page 38 of your agenda. The purpose of this report is to outline a new opportunity to Council to implement the Murterford Flood Study Flood Modelling Report 2025 and the Upper Ovens Regional Flood Mapping Study 2018, as well as the Upper Ovens Flood Modelling Climate Change Update 2025 into the Alpine Planning Scheme. Both flood studies were adopted by Council at the June or the Ordinary Council meeting held in June 2025, and councillors, you are further considering the implementation component for the flood studies. Implementation requires a planning scheme amendment, and this report recommends that Council pursues this via the Flood-Related Amendment Standing Advisory Committee, or SAC, pathway. This will allow Council to enter into a funding agreement with the Department of Transport and Planning to cover the costs associated with the amendment process. These may be up to as far as $100,000. Essentially, the process is broadly the same: an independent planning panel, standard planning scheme amendment route, versus the SAC, or the Standing Advisory Committee route. But any submissions that Council cannot resolve would be referred to the Flood-Related Amendment Standing Advisory Committee, which is an expert body established to consider amendments seeking to apply flood controls. Council officers are of the view that this is the most appropriate mechanism through which both flood studies should be implemented into the planning scheme.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Councillors, big recommendation. I'm not even going to start to try and read it. Then I'm going to move or second it. Moved by Councillor Graham and seconded by Councillor Anderson. Thank you. Councillor Graham.
There's a power of work to be done to get this work through, and there'll be a great benefit to all the communities involved into the future. Thanks.
No, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Anderson. Any other councillors got anything to add? I've got some questions. How long has the SAC route been available?
Yeah, good question, Mayor Nicholas. The SAC was appointed a couple of years ago by the Department as the preferred route through which approximately 150 flood studies across the state should be implemented. So they are sitting there unimplemented into the relevant planning scheme, which is quite a lot of work. The first tranche of councils are in the Goulburn Valley, and they have not progressed yet, but Alpine Shire Council was going to be part of tranche 2, but we're actually catching up with them quite quickly. So there's a lot happening in the flood control space where the government is mooting changes to the existing flood controls. So some councils are choosing to wait until those flood controls are announced, while others are progressing their amendments on the proviso that there may be a translation to the new flood controls. Apologies, that's quite complicated, but essentially the facility has been there for a number of years, but it hasn't progressed any flood studies yet. There's a lot happening behind the scenes, but nothing public.
Thank you. Certainly the work that we've seen is very complex and detailed, so I can understand why it's taking some time. Any further comments, questions from councillors? We'll take this from the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Is against, everyone else is for. And we move on to our Director of Corporate Community, Ms. Cook, and item 8.3.1.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 8.3.1 relates to the provision of a public dump point in the Alpine Shire. The purpose of this report is to provide a review and update of the analysis presented to the April 2018 Ordinary Council meeting regarding the provision of a public recreational vehicle, or RV, dump point in Bright. At the April 2018 Ordinary Council meeting, Council considered an analysis and recommendation regarding the provision of an RV dump point in Bright. At that meeting, Council resolved not to support the provision of a public dump point on public land in Bright, to upgrade the existing dump point facilities at Myrtleford Holiday Park to meet industry best practice, and to continue to facilitate public paid access to those facilities through the lease agreement, and to investigate the co-location of a dump point with the new amenities block in Toowoomba South. Through the 2025-26 community budget submission process, Council then committed to directing internal resources to review and update that analysis and those recommendations. A review of the publicly accessible dump point infrastructure across Alpine Shire, supported by customer inquiry data and consultation with service providers, indicates that existing facilities continue to provide adequate geographic coverage for recreational vehicle users, including those operating large self-contained vehicles. Publicly accessible dump points are available near both the northern and southern entry and exit points to the Shire and the Great Alpine Road, providing effective coverage for transient RV travel through the municipality. Quantitative analysis of Council's customer request management system shows consistently low levels of formal inquiry and complaints relating to dump point availability, with no recorded reports of illegal dumping during the review period. Council also acknowledges that informal feedback from members of the community has been received regarding the availability and location of dump points, which, while not reflected in formal reporting data, does provide useful context and contextual insight to community expectations and perceptions. It is acknowledged that public access to dump points located within privately operated tourism parks has become more limited in recent years, particularly during the peak tourism season. However, the available evidence does not indicate unmet demand of a scale that currently justifies capital investment in an additionally public accessible dump point. Installation of a new dump point would require capital expenditure and ongoing operational, compliance and supervisory costs. Any future consideration of additional provision would necessitate a clear policy position regarding user pays arrangements and the extent to which ratepayer funds should be subsidising infrastructure primarily servicing a non-resident visitor cohort. Based on the available evidence, current infrastructure remains fit for purpose at a municipal level. Continued monitoring of inquiry data, visitor trends and access constraints is recommended to ensure Council can respond appropriately should demand materially change, or should the outcomes of the tourism strategy, which is currently in development, indicate reassessment is appropriate. This should be supported by enhancing community education and awareness of existing RV dump point sites and facilities, ensuring that both visitors and residents are well informed about the available infrastructure and its locations to support effective utilisation. The recommendation is quite extensive and is in your report on the screen. Thank you.
Oh, that listed on that. Thank you, Ms. Cook. Not least, tell me if you like. Councillors, moved by Councillor Tansen, seconded by Councillor Ronco. Councillor Tansen.
So how often will this be reviewed? So will it be a 12-monthly thing or as required? And the second question I've got is where are the other public dump points in the Shire?
Thank you, Councillor Tansen. So we are not proposing to review this analysis every 12 months, but to continue to assess the data as it comes in. So we will continue to keep an assessment of what customer data is provided and any material changes in the environment as well. So should we be experiencing greater demand in services or a reduction in those publicly available dump points, which are now available for the community. I'm sorry, Councillor Tansen, what was the second part of your question?
And the second question I had was where are the public dump points in Shire
Councillor Tansen, there are a number of publicly accessible dump points. They're not necessarily public dump points. So there is a public dump point located in Dinner Plain, but there are publicly accessible dump points within the tourist parks across the Shire. So a number of tourist parks across all geographic locations enable non-resident visitors to access the dump point within their facilities for a small charge, usually about $5. We have a list of those sites on our website, and we keep that site up to date as best we can, and as situation changes, we also provide that information through our VICs and other communication channels. Visitors who are travelling with an RV generally also can access that information through the various apps that people use, like Wikicamps and others like that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco.
What action will be taken by Council to inform and educate better our visitor and community about public dump points in the Shire? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. So we keep a list of publicly available dump sites available on our website, and we do keep that up to date as we have more information. We also provide that information through our VICs. We can also provide that information through our tourism outlets and our communications that we undertake across the Shire.
Thank you.
Do other councillors have a question or comment? I'm just going to pick up the 2018 Ordinary Council meeting. We've been looking at this on and off for a long time, and this is by far the best review and the best information that we've ever had at Council from my experience. And I congratulate the people who put it together and the time that was spent, recognise the time that was spent to make it happen. And it's really thorough, and I think it is a really, that makes it easier to work with the recommendation. So thank you to all the staff involved. And at that we will take the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? It's unanimous. And I'd just like to apologise to the people who come and talk to me and say they really want a dump point. So I will talk to them personally. The next item is 8.3.2.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 8.3.2 is the Council Law Internal Resolution Procedure. The Council Law Internal Resolution Procedure is a supporting document to the Model Councillor Code of Conduct, which was first adopted in June 2025. This report presents an update to that procedure, which proposes the addition of an external mediation process to the procedure. This is seen as a positive step, providing an additional opportunity for dispute resolution between the informal internal councillor conciliation process, which is already defined in the procedure, and the need to call in for a formal internal arbitration process, which is prescribed in the Local Government Act 2020. The recommendation is that Council notes the addition of the external mediation provision in the procedure, adopts the procedure, revokes the previous version of the procedure being version 1, and signs and seals the procedure at the appropriate stage of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Councillors. Councillor moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. This is just a nice little tidy up of the procedure, so nothing major.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
It says we have external mediation provision in the procedure. Who will we be using as external mediation, and how would they be chosen?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yes, the question makes sense. We would determine the appropriate external mediator at the time that would be required.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? No. Councillors will take this one to vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And we're up to 8.3.3. Stop.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 8.3.3 is our financial sustainability report for quarter 3 of 25-26. The financial sustainability strategy has been developed to reflect Alpine Shire Council's commitment to long-term planning and sound financial stewardship. It seeks to address our financial sustainability challenge through a series of strategic and operational actions to be taken over this current council cycle. A part of monitoring and performing progress against the Financial Sustainability Strategy Action Plan is that we report quarterly aligned to Council's financial reporting, which will be in our next report. As of March 2026, all Year 1 actions identified through our Financial Sustainability Strategy Action Plan are on track to be completed as they are due, with some items being closed this quarter. The recommendation is that Council receives and notes the Financial Sustainability Report Quarter 3 for 25-26. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Cook. Councillors. Councillor Reid, Councillor Ronco, seconded Councillor Wynne. Councillor Ronco.
I have no question for this one, but it's always great to see the progress with some close item on the action taken for long-term financial sustainability. So yeah, it's very good to see that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne.
I note that CEO Mr. Will Jeremy was requested to find financial savings of $1.5 million over the current budget being formed for next year. And I'd like to congratulate him on finding $1.3 million to put us in a very sustainable position. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for everybody. Any further comment or questions from councillors? Ms Cook, I do have one, sorry it's on notice. There's a lot of work going on in the organisation that's about employee back and tightening the belt, and I just wondered how that's going culturally, how well people are managing and contributing to that process. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Perhaps I can answer that one. So we've worked hard with the organisation on a couple of things. One is to try and educate the organisation about the financial sustainability challenge. So we've run a number of sessions with our staff and had pretty transparent conversations about the gap that exists between what we've been spending and what the income that's coming in. So I think we've done our best to allow the staff to understand what the challenge is. What's also helped was the way in which Council communicated the request to save the $1.5 million, where you were very explicit about seeking for us not to achieve that through redundancies. I think that really helped the organisation to understand that Council had their backs. And I remember the conversation that we had, or the presentation you provided when you attended our session with the staff, Mayor Nicholas, which was really helpful, where you reflected on the work that's gone into building a positive culture within the organisation and the desire of the Council not to impact on that through its work. So, up to this point, we have achieved significant savings compared to where the financial plan was set last year. We've still got some way to go on our journey, so we're not yet in that financial position that we'd like to be, but we've made significant inroads, and we have achieved that without forcing a lot of staff, and I think that's been understood and appreciated by the staff, whilst they also appreciate we're still on a bit of a journey towards where Council would ideally like us to be.
Thank you, really appreciate that deep understanding of the organisation. I've got another question about how we're positioned in terms of other local governments and their financial sustainability. And I know it's a question without notice, but I recognise there's at least two councils the budget year coming ahead that have applied for rate cap exemptions that we've discussed or mentioned, and I just wondered if you've got a feel for how well we're doing in terms of the sector, because it's well known that local government's in a bit of trouble.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Perhaps if I can have a crack at answering that one. So the funding model in Victoria for local government is fundamentally unsustainable. So every single council is somewhere on a journey towards insolvency under the current model, and it just depends where each council's financial position was when it entered the rate capping process, how it's managed to manage its finances since that point as to where it is on that journey. The councils that have been disproportionately impacted, however, are the small rural councils, of which Alpine Shire Council is one of them. because our ratepayer base is very small, and our opportunities to create additional revenue streams are relatively constrained compared to larger metro councils, for example, at the same time as having a very large asset base that we have to maintain. So think about our road network that Alpine Shire Council is maintaining, 3 swimming pools, 3 VRCs, 3 libraries. You know, if we were a metro council, we'd have a very significant revenue over a very small area. So the small rurals are having the most challenge. We are seeing small rural councils that are moving towards the point where they're having to seek a rate cap exemption in order for them to remain financially sustainable. But I think all councils are ultimately somewhere on their journey towards that point, that the funding model is unsustainable as it's currently established.
Thank you. That sounds like work for the MAV, Municipal Association of Victoria, for our audience. Any further comments or questions from councillors? We'll take this on to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That is unanimous. And we move on to our 8.3.4.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 8.3.4 is our quarterly budget report for quarter 3 2025 to 2026. The report is to provide council with an overview of the financial position of council for the period which ended on the 31st of March 2026. In summary, council at that point, 31st of March 2026, was forecasting a full year operating surplus of $951,000, which is significantly lower than what was budgeted at $1.173 million. However, I will explain that variation in a moment. It was at that stage forecasting an adjusted underlying deficit, as we have been discussing over the months, of $156,000, which was a significant improvement of the underlying deficit we had budgeted for at the beginning of the year of $1.223 million. So that was a significant improvement in our financial position over the course of the year. The published projected position in terms of operating surplus is lower than what was budgeted for several reasons. Chiefly, a decreased operating grant income and the timing of grants received. So we receive a proportion of grants called the Financial Assistant Grant ongoing as a recurring grant. We received 50% of what was a significant grant in the last week of the last financial year when it was budgeted to be received in this financial year. So it is an accounting change rather than a material change in our income. So it shows in our reports, however, it is not a material change in our income. We also had a higher level of employee costs in this budget, in this position. However, I must explain that a proportion of that was actually simply due to the redistribution of some accountant funds. For example, we moved some workers' work cover insurance data from our material and services accountant into our employee costs. So again, it is not an actual change in our expenditure, it is a change in the accounting function. We have saved a significant amount though through reduction in expenditure over the course of the year, which is what is mostly driving the change in our forecast adjusted underlying deficit position. The recommendation is that council receives and notes the budget report for quarter 3 for the period ending 31 March. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Cook. Councillors? Councillor Anderson, Councillor Ronco, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Ronco.
Just do we have some indication on the effect of the fuel pricing rise into the quarter 4 2025-2026? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. We are currently undertaking some analysis on the potential impacts on our budget going forward of the change in petrol prices. As you probably appreciate, there are 2 main mechanisms by which we can be impacted by a change in fuel prices. One is through our own operations as a purchaser, because obviously we purchase petrol, and when the costs go up, our expenditure increases through our operations area. So that is a direct expenditure impact on us. The other way we can be impacted by increased fuel prices is through impacts on our contracts, or on our contractors. If their costs go up, potentially those costs move through to us and we pay increased costs through that. So we are currently undertaking analysis on any potential increases through the next year and how that may change between our draft budget position and our final budget, which we put to council next month. And we will factor those changes through that budget position and brief those up with councillors. And separately to that, our teams are undertaking an assessment of the contracts, our service contracts and our contracted provisions to ensure that we're properly accounting for any potential changes in those contracts too, so they can be properly reflected in next month's budget too.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions, councillors? Got one? So, Ms. Cook, the recent federal budget announced that the financial assistance grants would be sent forward this financial year. Can you just explain how that will work, given that we've already talked a little bit about that tonight?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. So the financial assistance grant is that operating grant that I spoke about that we received 50% of it in the last week of last financial year and 50% this year. And the reason it's reflected through our budgets is because our reports is because our budget assumed that we would receive 100% of that grant in this financial year. Because we have prior notice, which is actually quite nice, from the federal government that they intend on providing us with 80% of that grant in this financial year for next year and 20% in next year. We should be able to reflect that in our budget before it is adopted next year, which should make our quarterly reports slightly less confusing for people.
That's what I was hoping. Thanks. Anything further from councillors? No, we'll take this one to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously, and we move on to 8.3.5.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 8.3.5 is our draft library services plan, which we are bringing forward today to place on community engagement. The purpose of this report is to present the plan to be placed on community engagement to obtain community feedback for review and consideration prior to final plan development. The Library Services Plan 2026 to 2030, which I will simply call the plan, sets a clear strategic direction for Alpine Shire Council's libraries for the coming 4 years. The previous Library Services Plan was adopted in February 2022 and is clearly now due for review. Development of this plan has been guided by community responses to the Library Services Survey, evidence-based research, industry standards, guidelines and frameworks, and Council's key strategic planning documents, which include our Community Vision and Council Plan. At the heart of this plan is a clear purpose, which is to provide knowledge and connection for the people and communities within the Alpine Shire. The recommendation is that the draft Library Services Plan is placed on public exhibition for a period of 4 weeks. The public submissions are invited, and that submissions received will be considered as part of final plan development prior to the final plan being presented to Council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Moved, Councillor Graham, seconded, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Graham.
Nothing to add.
Councillor Byrne.
I look forward to community engagement with this draft policy. Thank you.
Do any other councillors have? Councillor Anderson.
Same question I usually ask. How can people go about doing this, making a submission?
Well, it's a very good question. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. So the Library Services Plan will be placed on Alpine Engage, which is our online engagement platform for community submission. However, we will also have hard copies available in our libraries for anyone who wishes to engage with the content in that mechanism, and we can assist with placing a submission through that mechanism. In addition, if anybody wishes to have a hard copy and they contact our customer service centres, we're always able to provide copies for people as well.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? I've just got a comment. I think it's really exciting and interesting to see some of the ideas and some of the things being rolled out in the libraries and how they've changed from sneaking in, getting a book when I was a kid to what they now offer. So this is exciting. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, councillors, let's take this one to vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we are up to 8.3.6. Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 8.3.6 is P2025-131, being the planning permit application number for the site 1 Toorak Road, Bright. The proposal is for the construction of a multi-dwelling residential development comprising 10 three-storey building blocks containing a total of 120 dwellings on the subject land, pursuant to the general residential zone and the bushfire management overlay of the Alpine Planning Scheme. The development comprises 90 two-bedroom apartments and 30 three-bedroom apartments, each building containing a dedicated entry foyer with staircases and lift access proposed within 3 of the 10 buildings. This application has not been placed on public notice. Under the Planning and Environment Act 1987, the responsible authority may determine to refuse an application without first giving public notice, where it is evident that a permit cannot be granted in any event. In this instance, the application is subject to an objection from the Section 55 determining referral authority, namely North East Water. As a determining referral authority has objected to the proposal, Council is not in a position to grant a permit unless that objection is withdrawn or consent is provided. In those circumstances, the statutory purpose of public notice will be substantially diminished, as there is presently no lawful pathway to Council to issue a permit. This application has been subject to referral, being both Section 55 determining referrals and Section 52 referrals. The site has been assessed against Section 55 of the Planning and Environment Act, and it has been recommended that the application is refused. The reason for recommending the application be refused is summarised as followed and is in far more detail contained within your report. It is considered that the application is inconsistent with the Alpine Planning Scheme and must be refused for the following reasons. North East Water, as a determining referral authority, has objected to the proposal on the basis that there is insufficient capacity within the existing reticulated sewage network to service this development. Any failure of the reticulated sewage network risks impacting the special water supply catchment area, and in accordance with Section 61 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, the responsible authority must refuse to grant a permit where a determining referral authority has objected to the application. However, further grounds for refusal are recommended in addition to the above, and these include: the proposal fails to demonstrate that it can be adequately serviced by essential infrastructure and does not represent orderly planning. The submitted Transport Impact Assessment report is inadequate and does not provide sufficient and reliable information to enable a proper assessment of the traffic, transport and road safety impacts of this proposal. The bushfire mitigation measures contained within the application documents do not adequately demonstrate that the proposal responds appropriately to bushfire risk. The proposal fails to comply with clauses of the Alpine Planning Scheme and does not provide a minimum of open space requirements. More detail and the clause references to that are contained within your report. The development does not adequately respond to environmentally sustainable design principles and is likely to result in increased energy demand and reduced occupant comfort. The proposal fails to achieve an acceptable planning outcome and is not supported by adequate technical analysis or infrastructure capacity and does not respond appropriately to the relevant provisions of the Alpine Planning Scheme. The full recommendation is contained within your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Councillors? Moved, Councillor Tansen. Seconder? Seconded, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Tansen?
Yeah, just one quick one. What would be the repercussions to Council if we were to not refuse this?
Thank you, Councillor Tansen. A determining authority has issued an objection, so Council does not have a lawful pathway to issue this permit. Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
I'd just like to thank, who was responsible for putting this report together? Darryl.
One of our senior statutory planners, Darryl.
I'd just like to thank Darryl for the work he's done. This is a lot of work. There's a long list of reasons why, we can't possibly let this go forward. Thank you.
Other councillors, questions, comments? No? I'm going to pick up something that I think is an educational opportunity for anyone who might watch council meetings. And this report says that we took 6 statutory days our planners took 6 statutory days to get to this point. But we know that the permit went in 2025 because of its number. Can you please explain, Scott, what that means?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Statutory days is a regulated term, and the way you calculate statutory days is contained within the planning regulations, and it stipulates triggers where the clock of days starts and stops. So 6 statutory days means 6 days that were counted as statutory under the regulations because they were days when the clock was started. Thank you.
I was just going to follow on from that one, and then you, Councillor Anderson. So, what happened in between?
So this planning thank you, Madam Mayor. This planning application has had a series of iterations. However, one of the reasons why the statutory days would be long, for example, without going through a number of years' worth of information, is, for example, should a formal request for information be issued to the proponent, while that request has been issued and the information has not yet been returned to council, for example, the clock stops on those days.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Did you have another question or comment?
Yeah, I guess that just on following on from that, because we'll have people come up to us in the community and say, I've had a permit going for a year, and it could be statutory, it could be 60 days, but their understanding of how long they've been waiting and how long we say it was taken is quite different. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? No? Councillor, see Mr. Jarrett.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. I've just observed that the date received on this report says the 5th of the 12th, 2015, and I wonder whether that's a typo on the front page that we might have correct.
6 days before the permit numbers 2024.
Oh, sorry.
My understanding is that this site has a long and complex history. One Turank Road has a long and complex history which predates this particular application.
Thank you. Good to go, just in case. Anything else, councillors? Councillor Townsend, okay, let's take this one to vote. All those in favour of the recommendation as it stands? That is unanimous. Thank you. And we now move on to informal meetings of councillors. And we have a recommendation that the summary as presented of 3 briefing sessions in a regional forum looking at corruption risks in local government. Informal meetings. Councillors, thank you. Councillor Brown has moved and Councillor Anderson has seconded. Or do you have anything to add? Councillor Anderson, anyone else like to make a comment? I'd just like to say that I think the regional forum was absolutely fantastic, and it was really good that we could get there. So from that we'll take the recommendation to vote. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. And then we move on to presentation of reports by delegates, and I'm going to start with Councillor Anderson on my right. Councillor Brown?
Nothing.
Councillor Brown? Councillor Ronco?
Yes, thank you. On the 7th of May 2026, the Alpine Resilience Partnership was held here in Mutterford. So, and that's include all emergency agency. So, some member of the IATV community, from the Alpine FM, from the FFH, from the Mount-Beauty Neighborhood Centre, from Alpine Health, from Big SES, from Australia Resort Victoria, from the Loop, from Big Paul, from the Safeway, from SES, and of course from the Alpine Shire were present. So, and I would like to say we had Councillor Townsend was with me, and also Councillor Smith. So it was good to see that this involvement. So we had the chance to welcome Honourable Helen Haynes, the federal member for Indite, as a guest speaker. So Helen Haynes presents us an update about the effect of the Longwood fire in January 2026 on our communities. So she brought Christy McBain, the Minister for Emergency Services, to inspect the fire ground for the Longwood fire. So she mentioned also her advocacy for better telecommunication reliability during emergency time. And we had also the opportunity to have a Q&A with Helen Haynes. So during the meeting, we reviewed the action list. Big Paul presented their report since our last meeting. We received also an update on the Loop website and their survey. So, and at the end of the meeting, we did a roundtable on general businesses. So I've been able to highlight the Alpine Shire Council advocacy for the upcoming Victoria State election, so including the increased municipal emergency management program funding, and also the improved community access to primary mental health care in the Alpine Shire. So next meeting will be held online on the 28th of July 2026. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. Councillor Townsend.
Councillor Ronco summed it up pretty well. The Alpine Resilience Partnerships, I've got to add things.
Thank you. I've got nothing. So we will move on to general business, and I'm going to start with Councillor Townsend.
Nothing from this, thanks.
Nothing to say.
Hi. I wanted to just say thank you very much to the local people who rallied together when we, as the Alpine Shire, were getting some pretty poor coverage about our capacity to welcome people, and particularly the police, to our area. And there were a lot of community members who reached out and said that's not accurate, and we did really good things, and we supported the police really well. So I just wanted to thank those people. And that's all I've got for general business, but I'm going to invite our CEO as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to just note the 8 leases that were put forward for a decision by Council this evening, and reflect on the work that's gone into not only those 8 leases, but that's the tip of the iceberg of the work that the Property and Contracts team has been working on over the last few years under Michael McDonough. Very significant amount of work. It all goes on behind the scenes. A lot of these are signed off under CO delegation. You only see the tip of the iceberg, which are the ones which are those that exceed 10 years. But they've transformed, and it's nothing short of a transformation, the quality of the documentation, the leases, the coverage that we've got across our facilities in the Alpine Shire. Through this period, I know that they've been working on some legacy issues dating back as far as the 1970s. So they really have been picking up a lot of that work and picking up a lot of gaps and doing a really solid job. And I just wanted to take a moment tonight just to recognise that and reflect on the work of the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy, and I wasn't aware that those leases have been in use for that long. So yes, well done. We move on to item 12, which is motions for which notice has previously been given. We have a motion in accordance with the Council's governance rules, Chapter 3, Part F, Section F11. Councillor Ronco and Councillor Byrne submitted the notice of motion, which is item 12.1 tonight, Rotary Club of Bright Events Strategy Exemption. And I will invite Councillor Ronco to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, the Rotary Club of Bright has been successfully operating its market in Bright CBD for over 20 years. After the announcement of the Alpine event strategy in November 2021, the Rotary Club of Bright has seen its market relocated over school holidays period. Since relocation at Owen Park, the Rotary Club of Bright have faced an increase in cost management and a decline in stallholders and visitor numbers, limiting their ability to make a direct contribution to local community projects. This year, in April 2026, the Rotary Club of Bright began its advocacy to council and councillor to obtain an exemption, allowing them to conduct their market in the Bright CBD. So for tonight, I would like to move the following recommendation: that council note the request from the Rotary Club of Bright for an exemption from the event strategy to reinstate its street market within the Bright CBD on school holidays period, and request the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, to report to the June 2026 Ordinary Council meeting, outlining considerations for Council in assessing this request, including whether further information gathering is required, including through a community engagement campaign, cost and resourcing implication, and finally, risk management consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. So the recommendation has been moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Thank you. Councillor Ronco, do you have anything else you'd like to add as the mover?
Thank you. Since I moved to the Alpenshire, I have known the market during Easter period and also during the Belmont Cup period, conducted by the Bright Rotary. And it's a very important market, I think. And I think, I always known this market there, and I've always been a convivial market. And since I know that since they have been relocated, so they always try to follow the recommendation from the strategy and for the following year, so it's 2021 until now 2026. So the thing, they try to make it work, but what I could hear from them is they're facing very important cost management. And for me, my only point of view that I also consider is also the safety risk for the community and visitor, because now instead to be in Bright CBD, it's along the river, and I find that people visiting us have to cross the Great Alpine Road to attend to this market, and I could find that a bit dangerous. I'm not an expert, and that's why I saw this report very useful for us to understand what the risk to manage this market along the river compared to the Bright CBD. So it's some of the main points that consideration that I would like to explore. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whilst I'm happy to support this motion, I look forward to a report prepared by the CEO and the officers of the Council as to further information gathering, cost and resourcing information and risk management consideration prior to making any decision on this, where the markets should be located. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Comments, questions? Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I've got two concerns with this. to have the market in the CBD require road closures, and that's been a fairly topical discussion point over the last few months with the expenses incurred. And secondly, if Rotary is granted an exemption from the requirement, then it would open a floodgate for other groups to apply for an exemption based on this precedent.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any other comments from other councillors? You get to go at the end. Councillor Anderson.
Are there any other sort of pathways for this sort of thing, sort of work to be done around strategy that we could look at this rather than doing it through a motion? Is there any other strategies coming up?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yes, the tourism and events strategy would be a key document which is currently on pre-draft consultation. That would certainly be a vehicle through which markets can be considered not only in Bright but all towns.
Just on that. Has Rotary spoken to our officers about in regard to that draft or being consulted?
Councillor Anderson, I believe that Rotary has made a pre-draft submission to that strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Anybody? Councillor Tanzo.
I'm not sure if we have an answer to this or not, but did we ever get any feedback from local businesses when we held the markets in the street? Did it affect them or impact them positively or negatively? Do we know at all?
You want that one, Ms. Cook? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Tanson. My understanding is we do receive feedback from businesses when there are road closures. However, should this motion be approved, then that is part of the information that we will bring as part of the report that is in the recommendation.
Any further from other councillors? No? Ms. Cook, we've already talked about and perhaps potentially Mr. Donovan, the tourism and event strategy that's just undergone its 10 plus sessions of pre-engagement. Would that also be doing looking at the impact of markets in the main street as the iteration and the development of that strategy goes ahead? Is that work that was already planned?
Thank you, Mayor Nicholas. So, if we broaden that out, theoretically, if there's any group that wishes to host a market, markets will certainly come up both at pre-draft and draft consultation. People are invited to make, or entities are invited to make a submission as part of that process. Council will then consider that in the drafting of a draft Alpine Shower tourism and event strategy. It will then be subject to wider community consultation, including with businesses, and both community and businesses are welcome to make a comment. If a final strategy includes a recommendation to do X, Y, and Z in relation to whatever space or explore it further in the town, there would then be a separate council process through which we would investigate and consult widely with materially affected businesses and the wider community in taking the recommendation from any strategy and actually giving it material effect on the ground. And it will be considered as part of council's normal process and whatever strategies are in place at that time. And council would then consider whether to give support to it. This is all hypothetical, of course. Give support to such a market following wider consultation.
So, in a nutshell, the recommendations looking for feedback is taking one piece out and doing it earlier than all the other work would be done. Yeah, thank you. I just want to make some other comments too, because I've got the history of this. So I was part of the council when the 2021 existing events policy strategy was put in place, and there was very strong feedback from the people in Island Street about having markets in the street and the impact that it had on their businesses. And when I look at what we're already doing a whole lot of work now, but that will help to address the Rotary and give them an opportunity to have their say. But what I also, when I look at the whole situation. So the people who are traders in Island Street and Barnard Street can't really change their model. They need foot traffic come in, and they feedback that we got in 2021, and it might change, is that people tend to go into the shops when there's a market on. So they're losing their business on a busy weekend, which is what part of their. It's very important for them that they get that business on these busy weekends. And I think about what Rotary could do. So instead of doing the same market that they've been doing for 20 years, they could do something that attracts people to the market for another reason. So they could change their model a lot more readily than a trader in the street could change the model. So I guess I'm thinking that whilst I recognise the intent, I think that it's really important that we go through the full process and look across all the options around tourism and events that we're already doing before we step forward. And then just picking up on Councillor Yarra's point, that you open the door to one, and then there's other organisations that would like to do something that's the current event strategy prevents them from doing, and that would potentially cause council a significant amount of work and potential and double up on what we're already doing. So I'm going to stop there and offer back to Councillor Ronco.
So, thank you. I could hear the concern that other councillors have on this topic, but just to address the point by Councillor Graham. So, the thing is, it's already, we have an event already in a Bright CBD outside school holidays period, so it's always there. So, we always, I know that they do already a market for the Bright Autumn Festival, and because they have 5 markets, 2 of them is already happening in the Bright CBD, and people are happy with this one. Even businesses around in the Bright CBD are quite happy with this one. So it's already happening. So for me, it's just a logical thing to bring this market back where it was. It's for me, I find that more safe. The second point that has been raised, so it's also why we would like to present this motion is now instead to wait for the tourism management strategy. The result of the tourism management strategy will be endorsed. What I could understand, it will be end of the next financial year, so will be just probably in May or June 2027. So what I want to give to the community and also to the Rotary Club of Bright is some certainty. So I know that the next market will be on the public on the school holiday period will be next November for the Melbourne Cup weekend. Following that, you will have also in January and also for Easter. So I want to give them some certainty what to expect. So that's why I wanted to bring that a bit earlier. What I was expecting is to get this exemption from the strategy 2021, and when we review the strategy for next year, so we have some consultation to reinforce this exemption and going forward. So this exemption will be available until we have the tourism management strategy endorsed. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Ronco. Councillors, we're ready to take this one to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? That is Councillor Ronco and Councillor Byrne. All those against? That is the rest of us. And the motion is not carried. I'd like to thank Councillor Ronco and Councillor Byrne for putting this up and allowing a really good discussion about it.
Yeah, I think it was very important to address it to the community and to be transparent to the same thing, so as is there.
Thank you. And now we've lost my page. Now we move on to item 13, reception and reading of petitions, which are none. documents for signing and sealing. And we did have a giggle about this because there's quite a few, so it cannot be Councillor Byrne. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, for the documents for signing and sealing? Councillor Anderson and Councillor Graham. And could we'll take this one for vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's unanimous, thank you. And then we have item 15, confidential reports, and there are none. Item 16, closure of meeting, and that is now, and it is 6:56. Thank you, everybody.